Well, this is the story of Rouses and Sugarbeeting. It's quite a social thing because so many Bampton people were involved in not only the hoeing and the nurturing of the plants, but also the harvesting, and it goes back to Bampton Station when steam engines was coming into there, steam trains was coming into there, and we used to load them. And one of the things that Terry, my brother here, can relate more than any, he was in charge of the preparing the ground to get it ready with the manure, etc. He was also the man that did the planting of the seed. He was also the man that drove the steerage hoe. I had to sit on the back and steer straight, or I got shouted at. And then come the harvesting. Terry was in charge of all the harvesting of it, driving the tractor to lift the sugar beet at one stage. Then we moved on to an automatic harvester, and then taking the sugar beet to Bampton Station until the station closed in 1963. But interesting during that time, we used to take them to Alberscott Station as well as Bampton Station, depending on where our permits came, but more of that later. But the thing that Terry can praise himself with is that he's gone right from that stage to actually driving the loads of sugar beet. Did we hire Stan Shep, or did you borrow Stan Shep?
He was delivering coal that day, and he couldn't take his loads
right
to
Kidderminster.
And so I had to do it.
Yeah, but you had been with him once, had you, or not?
No, it was completely new job. So I started off at the same time as milking.
Right.
In the morning.
Yeah.
And get there.
Yeah, so right, Terry's obviously done, when the railway closed, actually driving Stan Shep lorry with something like 15 tonne of sugar beet on board to Kidderminster sugar beet factory, and as Terry just said, he'd never been there before. There was no sat-navs in them days, was it? So really I'd like to go back to the beginning, and yeah.
Terry, can you take your hand off your face, love, because we can't see you. That's it. Okay.
All right. So let us go back to the preparation of the ground. Now, I remember spreading all the manure from the farm by hand. So you would load it up onto a tractor by hand, right? And then you would go down whatever field you wanted to go on, and if it was going to be the sugar beet field, you get busy there. And health and safety would go bananas, because what you do, you get on it, probably 2 or 3 of you, and so you're driving down the field, you set the tractor going, and you get off the tractor and join everybody on the trailer with a prong, and you're slinging away and spreading the muck, but nobody's driving the tractor, but you're hoping that he's going in a straight line. But Terry was so cool, even when it got to the end of the hedge, there's me thinking, well, if he doesn't hurry up and get off and turn that tractor, we're going to go through the edge. But somehow he was so cool to get off, turn the wheel and turn and back we go again down the other way. But all done by hand, so the preparation of the soil was important, and the time of the year. Obviously the earlier you get it in, the better. Then Terry would plough the manure into the soil, give it a couple of months, then of course we would start preparing the tilth, which was once again Terry's job. You prepare the tilth, plant the seed. Now originally, planting the seed, we had an old Knaps drill, Knaps of Clanfield, made some very famous drills for drilling corn, right? Well, Reggie was one of these people that he was very innovative, so that this drill that would plant about 13 rows of corn could be converted to plant sugar beet. 4 rows of sugar beet at a time. What did you put?
Soap.
So, it was a drill that had cups.
Sunlight soap.
So the drive would come from the field wheel. So when you're going along like that, the field wheel's going round, and that's driving the mechanism, of which you could alter the gear in to make it go ever so slow, depending on how much grain you wanted to plant. But Reggie, trying to cut these corners, you see, he come up with a lovely idea of only having 4, so he blanked a lot of these drill works up so that there was only 4 going down, and to not too many seeds would be in the cup going over to plant. He put sunlight soap in each cup so that only one or 2 seeds would come out and go in. Because if you planted, and anybody who plants beetroot would know this, if you plant them all like that, well, you know jolly well, you've got to plant a line because some of the seeds will fail. So you've got to plant it quite thick. Well, when you're sugar beeting, they've got to be 10 inches apart. So in other words, a lot of seed is going to be wasted. So what Reggie did was to put soap in these little cups so only 1 seed would go at a time. Very clever, you see. So that was the way it was planted in the early days, and then Terry was sort of very with it and wanting modern stuff, and we then got a drill that was an individual seeder, and it was 4 rows at a time, a rubber belt on the top with little holes in, and a seed would drop into that hole, and there would be a sensor that would press it into that hole, and that sensor would obviously go up and down every time a seed went through, and if it didn't, then a light would come on on his tractor. So you'd have all these 4 lights going all the time, but you'd have to keep an eye out for one not operating correctly. So the seed then was much better thinly spaced, but was still certainly 3 inches. But if you can imagine, if you're putting, like in the case of beetroot, if you're putting them in a continuous line, some of them are going to be intergrown and entwined, and you've got to come along with a hoe and single them. So in the early days, when Terry used this particular drill, you would very often, your first job hoeing would be bunching. You just go along and take a bunch out, so you'd have your 10-inch hoe blade and you just go along like that. But then you then had to go again and single them, so you'd have to make sure that only 1 grew at every 10 inches, which was quite a back-breaking job, and you'd spend hours and hours in the field doing this. And when this new drill come along, that was putting them out single spacing, it was so much better. But it was such a terrific thing for the community, because there would be probably as many as 10, 15 Bampton housewives that would come down hoeing for us. Sometimes you would get people who would want to have a contract and do piecework. So Dad would measure a ½ acre, they would agree a price, and that would be that man's job or woman's job to do whenever she wanted or he wanted in their time. So in other words, they could do it at night. Well, because we were still milking cows, etc., our day was limited. So our day would probably start at 9:30 in the morning. The tractor would go up New Road, and the women folk would jump on the back of the trailer with their lunch, and off we would go down the fields and do the hoeing. And it was terrific, because men don't like scandal, but they like to hear about it. So we would make sure that there was probably a woman between each one of us, so that we could hear all what was going on in the village. it was quite an education town, wasn't it? It's absolutely marvellous. Lots of laughs, lots of sadness when people were going through a hard time, but it was part of the culture. And this would go on from early May, when the seedlings had come through. Very often, if you had to go through them twice, then that would take you right through to end of July, when the corn harvest was coming on. So it was a very, very busy time, very, very intensive time, that you were hoeing day in, day out, for absolutely months. Of course, as a young teenager, you try to think of different ways to stop Dad pressuring so much, and so you would endeavour to involve him in conversation, so that Reggie would stand up, my boy, that was the time, I remember your grandfather. Loved to hear it, but I even loved it more because it was giving my back a rest. So it was a two-pronged thing. Anyway, so you would do your hoeing. And then another nice thing, like come 12:30, you'd all go and sit under the hedge. You go to the tractor and trailer, get your lunch, and sit down. Now that was a real, absolute eye-opener on what people bought for lunch. You know, sometimes it was straightforward. Sometimes they'd even have faggots. You know, wrap them up in some tin foil, cook faggots, and that's right. And some would have just plain cheese and chutney. Some would bring a piece of cheese and have a knife and cut it while they were having a chunk of bread.
What did you two have?
Well, I remember having spotted dick.
Cold spotted dick.
And that's, nearly all basic sandwiches, really. Jam sandwiches. I remember Terry and I used to go to Burford Grammar School, and the school dinners were blinking horrible things. And so we opted, which you were allowed to opt, into taking your own sandwiches, right? So I was a bit late living up New Road and going to miss the bus if I wasn't careful, so I shot into the larder, grabbed me sandwiches and went off to school. And of course, I don't know whether you were the same, Terry, you get hungry halfway through school and you'd lift your desk and sneak your hand in like that and find a sandwich or something like that and shut this in, and the teacher wouldn't know and you'd eat your sandwich. Well, I did that on this occasion. Oh, that's funny. And I bought the whole family ration of cheese. No knife, no bread, no... So
I bet you were popular.
I went blooming hungry that day. But anyway, getting back to hoeing. So it was a wonderful involvement of people. You see, today, I mean, every household you go to, all the kids, they've got their blinking telephones out and they're not conversing with one another. And yet here you had the whole village conversing with one another. And certainly people in Bampton know a hell of a lot of my inner secrets because there was that bond that bonded you to each other. Yeah. And even to this day when you see this, and it was lovely. So okay, so the crop would then mature. It was grown under licence for the British Sugar Corporation, and there was a man who was in charge of this area, Mr. Flurry. There's the Flurry family from, I think it was Stanlake they come. In fact, Janet Flurry is still a friend of mine, lives at Tainton now, and it was her husband's uncle that would come round and advise us on how to grow sugar beet. So it was done under licence. They provided the seed, etc., and they kept an eye on it to see that it was going properly. And very often, what was this, yellow aphids? Oh, the aphids would get it. The leaves would turn yellow, and the aphid would get it. So he would come in.
Leaf aphid.
Leaf aphid, that's it, the aphids would get it. So, you know, even though in those days there weren't the sprays about, there still wasn't the ladybirds about, they would have had the aphids. So you had to do something about it because you were growing sugar beet for them. and they wanted it done properly, so they would instruct you.
Was there still a carryover from the wartime wanting
Oh.
the sugar beet?
Absolutely, Jan, absolutely, because how are we going to get your sugar? You know, the German submarines were stopping the food getting to this country, the sugar, etc., getting into this country, and it was, up until quite recently, a good way for England to get the sugar. Something like 14% of your crop was sugar, wasn't it, if I remember rightly? And you were paid on the sugar content. So once again, Mr. Flurry would advise you on what to do, and the most of the sugar was actually in the deeper root. So the longer root you could get on your sugar beet, the higher the sugar content would be.
How interesting.
So, so we would grow it, etc., and it would reach harvest time. Now, what a labour-intensive job that was. Once again, it involved. It's usually probably too cold and wet and nasty for most of the women, and it was later in the year, because your crop usually finished by December. You would have harvested your crop and got it off to the sugar beet factory, but you were governed by the British Sugar Corporation again. They told you would have permits. So you would, at the start of the season, Dad would know from these permits when he had to have a 15-ton truck available to take the sugar.
That's interesting. I was sort of expecting a phone call to say I want so much this week.
Phones, Jan, we're talking about no phones in 1950. Yeah. Oh, hang on, I'll do you on my mobile.
No. No, I thought you'd be phoned or written to once a week saying we'll have a trailer next week, but you had much more lead-in time.
Much more notes than that, Jan. Right at the beginning, you knew when your loads was going to go.
Right.
So
you could plan your work.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that was the way it had to work.
Yeah.
You had, right, we've got a load, a 15-ton truck who's going to be in Bampton station in 6 weeks' time. Then you knew, right, well then 3 weeks before that you had made sure you got it harvested and up and ready, and then on the day you went up to Bampton station with your loads. And you were given about a day, wasn't it, it had to be loaded and gone. So once you got in, as I say, September, and you got all your permits in, and that's typical government, isn't it? Permit. I will permit you to bring me a ton of sugar beet. That's how it was. So the harvesting itself. You've got sugar beet in the ground, they're probably this long, right? A sugar beet is. You go to that, if you've done a job properly, it's going to be about that long. And the first job, once you got your permit, you knew how advanced, of course you were dependent on the weather once again, then Terry would go out with the David Brown Cropmaster and a hydraulic implement that had two shares on it, like that, my face come. Two shares like that, they would go along, and so the root would go between the shares, but the way it was designed, that as that gently went along, so the sugar beet would go up and would be lifted. So it's only lifting it, easing it out of the ground, and obviously it could stay there and stay fresh for quite a while because it was in, it could still get moisture if need be. So Terry could do more than what we needed. So if you've got a 15-ton truck going to come next week, then he could probably do enough for 2 trucks, but they wouldn't come to any harm. But once that's done, and we just said, right, here, let's all systems go, then gangs of us would go out there and you'd do 2 rows at a time. And the rows, if I remember rightly, Terry, were about 16 inches apart. 4 6 is 24, 4 1s is 4... Yeah, that would just about take the width of the machine. So your rows are 16 inches apart, and you would have, one person would have a row on his right and a row on his left. He would pick 2 sugar beet up, bang them together to knock all the dirt off, and he would lay them down. So he would lay them that way, next to bonk, next to bonk, and the person there would do the same, that, so they're facing that way. So you've got your sugar beet with the roots more or less entwined like that all the way down the field. The next job is to go along with a big billock, chopper, all sorts. One old gent, because it did involve casual labour. Oh, Jimmy Swinford, no, what was his name? Swinford, Mr. Swinford.
It was, wasn't it?
There's old Mrs. Swinford from that Queen Street there. He was one. So lots and lots of the old gents of Bampton. It was a chance for them to earn a bob or two, but at the same time, it was helping us harvest the crop. This one gent from, I forget what his name was, from Aston, and he had a big knife about that long with a handle there like that, so it had a blade like that. And he was good at telling stories. And he had Terry and me one day, he said, my boys, he said, back in the Boer War, he said, that knife has slipped many a horse's belly when I was in the trenches, I cut him open. Well, scared the life out of us. We had a look at his knife, it said 1940.
Oh, a bit Dad's Army, that.
Yeah. But there again, he rode his bike all the way from Aston to have work. Lots of retired gents up New Road. They would come along and help us. It was lovely, absolutely lovely. So, that, you know, as I said, you chop them, so you pick it up by the root. I'm right-handed. You pick it up by the root, donk like that, but you got so skilled that you could cut it. When you lift the sugar beet up, there's a green piece around about an inch close to the leaves, and you got so skilled that you just pick it up like boink, and it would be dead on that green. So the green went with the top onto the ground to be fed to the cows later on, and the sugar beet itself, which was cut nicely, was put in a heap. You see, you got quite a donk, donk, and you know, you could do quite a bit in a very short while. So there you got the heaps. So if you've got one man there, then your heap would be in the middle, obviously. So I would be chucking there, and he would be chucking there. And then you've got a heap, you just move on to the next heap. And if it was really bad frosty, you'd often take the leaves and cover the leaves onto the heaps. Yeah. So the heaps would then in a line, obviously, and then your next job was the tractor and trailer to go between the two lines of heaps. So that a couple of men would be shoveling that side onto the trailer, a couple of men that side onto the trailer, and as the trailer would go up the fields, so you would load your trailer. Not the easiest of work because there was no such thing as four-wheel drive tractors in those days. Our prime tractor was a David Brown Cropmaster. It was a real modern tractor, quite fast on the roads. It would do 18-20 miles an hour on the roads, which was quite fast in those days. And you would learn ways in which it's quite an art. Perky Radband taught me a hell of a lot of when a tractor got stuck in the mud, how you get out of it. One of the things that he taught me was, okay, so she's skidding, so all her cleats is full of mud. So pull the drawbar out, the pin out the drawbar, go up the field, go as fast as you can to the wheels to shake all the mud up, and come back in again fresh, and away you go again. Another way, very, very dangerous, and the Cropmaster was absolutely ideal for this, that whilst the drawbar, the actual drawbar, was probably 18 inches from the ground, but then the drawbar would go to the trailer and it'd probably go slightly uphill. So therefore, the traction was pulling, so your tractor was trying to pull, but it's lifting your backside up. So what we used to do, the David Brown had a lovely square drawbar like that with the bottom plate there, and you'd hitch the trailer to the top one. which would then pull the tractor down. But that, you see, was highly dangerous because the front come up and everyone came. So then you had people standing on the front of the tractor to hold him down while he drove. And the one thing you taught me, Terry, was the higher the gear, the better the traction. And it's very true today. If you're in snow and in an ordinary manual car, if you're in snow, try second or third gear, not first, because you get better traction and the engine relating to the condition. So anyway, so we very often have to put two tractors on, put it to the end of the road, and then in the early days, you would hitch one trailer behind the other, and we had special drawbars fitted on our two-wheel tippers, if you remember, that you could hitch another trailer on, and you trundle off up to Bampton station with two trailers. Now, having got this far, that was not your end of your problems, because when you had your permit for a 15-ton truck in Bampton station, or Alvescott station it could be, you then had to negotiate with the station master as to, could I have a 15-ton truck for Sugarbeet on Wednesday the 3rd of October, whatever. And you had to really butter him in. Mr. Johns, he was all right. It was Cockney George. Cockney George. He was a little short-ass bloke, and typical short bloke, full of mouth. But he wouldn't have go on at you, and he would be as awkward as can be. Now, why the concern? Well, it's like this, that if you could have a truck put into the dock at Bampton station, I don't know whether the dock's still there, certainly photographs of Bampton station, you'll see it's like basically it's the platform. So you've got this concrete area that's the platform, and if they pulled their trucks into there and let you have a 15-ton truck there, that was ideal, because it was the top of the truck was probably by your shoulder, so just lovely shoulder height to shovel Sugarbeet into them. And incidentally, a Sugarbeet prong was a speciality, because it had something like 8 prongs on it, and each one had a knob on the end, so that when you shoveled into the Sugarbeet it didn't stick. So and you get, and it'd be about that wide, it'd be about that wide and about that long, so you get quite a few Sugarbeet in it.
That's like the prongs that the road menders had.
Yeah, but the roadmen usually had their spikes on, wouldn't it?
I don't know, I know it was eight prongs.
Yeah, these had a knob so that you didn't stick your beet. But if they were in an awkward mood, they said, oh yeah, I got a 15-ton truck, where is it? Down the sidings. Well then, he's 6 foot above you, and you've got to shovel Sugarbeet up horrendous, you know. And the Rouses weren't in the mood for giving tips, so there's no way that any backhanders was likely to come from us. And so a lot of our loads, I'm afraid, was down in the sidings, but it made such a difference in the town if you were just shoved in it like that. So once you filled it up, you had to make sure that actually, so that we could get as many Sugarbeet onto a trailer as possible, that was an art, because this edge of the trailer in those days was only an edge like, because it was the same trailers you had for sacks of corn and manure and all that sort of thing. So then you would place each Sugarbeet along like that. You'd build a wall of Sugarbeet and then chuck it in and heap it up inside. So then we did it later on. We did have trailers with sides on, wasn't it? Because you shovel in like that, go like that, and bang your knuckles. But you learned. So anyway, so the Sugarbeet would be loaded and off it would go, and that was so that in a year, Well, if you had 20 acres of sugar beet, which is probably about the maximum that we ever had, I'm going to, and you would, I lost my train of thought, so you can cut me there, can't you? Yeah. Yeah, so the sugar beet would then go off to the sugar beet factory, and you would all wait anxiously for the report. And the report would come back and say what percentage of dirt. But even though you've banged it, you still get a percentage of dirt. And you would be penalised for the dirt that went. But you would be rewarded for the sugar content that went. And so, obviously, you were a little bit more careful to come back with a high dirt tariff. Then, of course, next time Dad would be on to us, well, I want it a bit cleaner than that, so you spend a bit more time on the banging and when you're loading and all that sort of thing. Well, then, that was how it was done in the first few years, and then we got really modern. I would imagine it was probably at the same time that we got the electric drill, the Stanhay drill.
Yeah.
We then got a catch pole sugar beet harvester, which was a completely new game altogether. All these men having to do all those jobs was done with one machine, and that was so much better. So the machine would go along, Terry would be driving the machine with a power takeoff drive machine. Terry would be driving the machine down there. I would be stood on a plate with a big steering arm, if you remember. And these, the front wheels was more like coulters and actually cut into the ground. So you had good control. And once again, because it was precision done, that if I was going up the row there with that coming through the middle, on this side was the topper. So you would when you went first into a field, you would go up and top one row, then you would come back, then you would move over, and away you go. That'd be that way, sorry. So he would top, then the next time you would come over, that one would be being dug, that one would be being topped. And it was an enormous wheel about like that with about 4 or 5 discs on. And that would climb up. It wasn't power driven, it was driven by as you went along. So you've got your sugar beet there like that, and this big wheel would come over and it would gauge the height that the sugar beet was, because some sugar beet are up here, some are down there. So that would cut the top off at the right height. And then obviously the next one, if it was down there, it would drop. So that was all automatically working. Behind that was some rubber fingers. They were about that big, rubber fingers, and about that long. And they'd be flicking round on, so they wouldn't damage the sugar beet at all, but they would flick the leaves off. Right. So this big wheel would be cutting it, and just it would be falling down there. The rubber would be flicking, sorry, that way, because you're going down it would be flicking it under the machine, and away you go. And so then you would do the next row. I would be doing the driving bit, Terry would be driving the tractor and the machine. And in the early days, it was all done with elevators. And these elevators had weights on them. So you've got a chain, and it would be about that wide. The bars would be, about that wide, and they would be unusual shaped. And then the sugar beet would come up this elevator, and then there would be another set of chains above it with weights on that would clean it. So it started a tumbling effect to try and make them cleaner. And then that would go into another elevator, which would go straight to a tractor and trailer that's running along the side of you. But that then could be difficult, because whilst this one can do its digging all right, that load's getting heavier and the tractor's starting to skid, so he ends up still back there. And if Terry hasn't noticed, he's gone down there and there's a whole line of sugar beet. But give you credit where it's due, you were pretty spot on with that. Anyway, so we then went up market and we changed the elevator for a tanker. So then you would go up the field, and usually you get up the field quite easily. And it was obviously one tractor driver, one tractor and a machine operator. And when you got to the end of the field, back up to a heap, pull the lever, out would shoot the sugar beet, you go down the next row, same that end. So you had a big loads of heaps of sugar beet this end, heaps that end, which was then much easier because very often you planted your crop so that the gates to the field and road were the end you were going to put your sugar beet. So that saved you, that saved you that problem. And then off we would go, as I say, to the station, much easier then, much faster. We started to put sides on the tray, because even Bertha had big sides on it. in those days, trailers were usually homemade, and we had one called Hicks's trailer, which was made by the blacksmith at Clanview, Mr. Hicks, and that was on lorry wheels that were quite thin. So that once you got loaded with sugar beet, you'd very often disappear in the ground. But Dad, right from the early days, he went to a Burwell Farm sale, and he bought an elevator. And this is a lovely story because I had a continuation of it a fortnight ago. So he had this trailer, an elevator. We used the elevator for a few years, and our Uncle Dick, was a keen carpenter, and he spent his holidays coming up here to do work for Dad. He would build chicken houses, he would build anything, and he changed this wooden elevator chassis into a trailer. And we managed, in those days there was glider tyres, were about by the 100, and so we managed to get some glider tyres put on this trailer. So there it was, Uncle Dick had built a big trailer, blinking great glider tyres on it, and so we called it Big Bertha, didn't we?
Yeah.
Big Bertha would take a lot. And then in the end, because of the sugar beet situation, Uncle Dick designed sides to go round it with a big chain across it so that they wouldn't do that on you. And then we could take a much bigger load of sugar beet to the to the station.
Can I take you back? You've cut the tops off. That was for feeding the cattle. Did you put the cattle in the field to eat it, or did you pick it up?
It depends. See, our way of farming in those days, backhouse farm, or indeed home farm, Dad went into business at an ideal time, 1948. There was a lot of farmers had gone out, a lot of farmers had got fed up with farming, etc. And a lot of land came on the market. So to start with, Dad bought a home farm that had, he had 27 cows and 27 acres. Most of it rented. The only field he had was an 8-acre field right down the bottom of Gog Lane. And Colin still farms that to this day. And that field, the first year, Dad decided, because he was a firm believer in not having all your eggs in one basket, right? So he would have chicken, he'd have pigs. His logic was brilliant. His logic was, never keep anything that's unproductive, right? So if you have a chicken, and Dad was keeping quite a few chickens because he was incubating them himself when he worked for Mr. Collins. If you had chicken and it grows, it'll lay an egg. If it doesn't lay an egg, you stretch its neck. Either way, you've got something to sell, right? If you have a beef calf, that's going to take you 2 years before you got any money back on that. So Reggie had pigs, because half of Bampton kept pigs, or in the council.
What, do you sell them as weaners?
Pardon?
Did you sell them
Sell
as
them as
weaners?
weaners, yeah. 6 to 8 weeks old weaners. And then he was a firm believer in having his eggs in many baskets. So that first year that we had the 6 and 8 acre down bottom Gog, he grew wheat, barley, oats, mangels and kale.
Yeah.
He harnessed me and him to a drill, put a half underweight weight on it, and me and him had to pull this drill. That was every 1 foot, every 16 inches apart, planting kale and mangels. up the field, then of course the top bit. But that's how Dad worked. And so he spread it out. So then we had fields Dad was able to buy. I remember the very first year we were eating our lunch in Bottom Gog, and we were in the other side of the hedge because it was an east wind, and he said, "Oh, I'd love to buy this field," and he did. He ended up buying all of Gog Lane. He then bought a lot down Buckland Road, and he bought a lot down Sharney. So we had these, basically we're 50-acre blocks, so we had these lots of fields around like that. So if it was possible, if our Sugarbeet was where, because the cows were with a portable milking parlour, so if the cows were in that area, then they would graze them, and certainly if it was dry, put an electric fence up and they would graze the leaves from the Sugarbeet harvester. But if not, then once again you came behind, shoveled it onto a trailer.
So it was more manual work.
It was more manual work, but it was a damn good food for the cattle.
Is the leaf fairly
Sweet
high in
milk.
sugar? Yeah, yeah. Is it fairly high in sugars, the leaf as well as the
Yes,
beet?
yeah.
Because I know beetroot leaves are very nice and sweet to eat.
Well, that's right. That's the thing that people do more now. They didn't in our day when we were kids. Eating beetroot leaves, but nowadays, of course, it's cut out of this salad and whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that it was a very useful crop to grow.
Right. Can I move you on now to when the station closed? Because then, how did the Sugarbeet get to Kidderminster?
Believe it or not, Janet, the same way you had, we knew the station was closing, you still had your permits, but it was a lorry.
So it went by
So
lorry.
exactly the same. You had to negotiate with a haulier and say, well, I've got permit for this day and permit for a month's time. You know, you didn't know how your permits was coming. You could probably have 3 in a week. But you know, you knew at the beginning of the season, but that's how it would happen. You had no control. It was once again the government was saying, "This is when we want your big." Yeah, fair enough for them.
Yeah.
Fair enough for them. They want to govern the amount that their factory can take. So you can understand why it was done. I don't. I certainly didn't have a problem with that.
Terry, do you remember which hauliers you used?
Okies
Okies? Mm.
and Stan
Stan Shat. Yeah. Yes.
So that was Edie Quick's brother, was it, Stan Shepherd?
Yeah. Eating
Yes.
Quick's brother. That's
Right.
right. That's right. Stan was into quite a few things. He did a lot of haulage. He was even a special constable. No, not a lot of people know that. Yeah. So Stan had a Bedford TK, I think it was called.
That's right.
He had a Bedford TK, and it was once again I would imagine 12 ton at a time, and he would come down the fields. But once again, of course, when you're doing a lorry, is he going to get into the field to get it? Because a lorry is only 2-wheel drive, etc. So if it was iffy, then obviously we would have to put in our trailers and get it to an area where he could be loaded. But by that time, we had an elevator. Because you were then, it was in a heap. You then had a petrol-driven elevator, and it had a little hopper on the end, and so we just shoved it into the elevator, and that loaded up on its own. So much easier.
Did you ever have a time when neither Okies nor Percy Shepherd were available?
I don't think so, Jan, because once again it was permits. It was a matter that couldn't arise.
So one time, Terry, you drove the lorry to Kidderminster, didn't
Yeah.
you? How did that come about?
Well, because Stan couldn't deliver.
Stan wasn't available, but his
Yeah.
lorry was, and he let you take
Yeah.
the load.
Yeah, he'd never driven a lorry before in his life.
Nobody driven tractors.
Yeah. A David Brown Cropmaster, which is not much bigger than this table, and a 15-ton lorry. I mean, today they'd go bloody mad, wouldn't they, the authorities?
Yeah.
But there
But
wasn't
you
the
did.
stuff on the roads.
I should never forget it. He just got in and off he went. No sat navs, nothing.
It's like, I was talking to that chap that he was taking a pint of milk out of the churn and he slipped on the stand. This is up your place. Slipped on the stand and cut his hand very badly. So I trotted him indoors and said, can you take him down to the doctor? And this is where I get funny about him. So I phoned the dairy up and I said what I was doing. I'd pick up the rest of the churns and bring the lorry in. But you see, I didn't have any insurance. And I was just telling the chap what I was going to do.
Helping out.
Yeah.
Which people did.
Mm.
So that milk lorry driver was George Smith, I think his name was. And he was mouthy. I never known anybody had such a mouth on him and on, because if the milk was, if we were late. One day, a tramp had come in and the smell of the tramp had spiked the cows.
Yeah.
So they were all, you know, you couldn't get your cows into milk 'em. So when he come in, that was our excuse. Well, I bloody heard the lot now, he says. A tramp upset the cows and that's why you're late. You had a night out, that's what the truth is.
Going back to the time when ladies and gentlemen helped you hoeing, can you remember the names of any of those people?
Yeah.
It'd be lovely to record them.
Yeah, yes, certainly. A lot of it was the Curtis family. There was Ivy Beckett. What's the other? Ivy and... Oh, it'll come to me in a minute. So there was quite a few of the Curtis. Pat Dixon, as she was in those days. Snooks.
Snooks.
That's it, Mrs. Snooks.
Maggie.
She accused me it was you all a blinking time. I had to take a lot for you. So, Mrs. Snooks claims that when they were potato picking, because this followed, no, it was before Sugarbeet, it was around about the same time. Potatoes are September-ish, whereas Sugarbeet will go on to December. So, you had Boy, Beckett and Ivy.
Yeah.
That was it, Tom. So Mrs. Snooks, right, for years up until just recently, I think she's died now, she had a terrible stroke, she hasn't died now. Mrs. Snooks always reckoned that when she was potato picking, that I was driving the tractor and I'd have a potato and throw it at her backside. And it was him. I never did a potato, but she said, no it wasn't, it was you. And I had to apologise every time I saw her for hitting her bum with a potato.
Terry Rouse.
Actually, because that was a good trick, wasn't it? To throw a potato a long way, you get these stakes that come off the thatching, right? And you dig it into a potato and then whang it, it was like a sling.
Oh,
and you go, oh my God, you could go miles with it. I mean, my dad didn't dare catch us, we'd been in real trouble with food being thrown around like that.
It was Billy Gotobed put a stop to it because he threw potato at us and I returned the damn thing. Only I connected with it.
Did Billy go to bed, live down Field?
Yeah. When Dad was first being the foreman and manager of Mr. Collins, right? Mr. Collins went off for the weekend and left Dad a load of instructions. There's Arthur, which was Arthur Hayes, he had to go and plough something or other, and Fred Beachy, he had to go and do something or other. And then there was Billy Gotobed, My dad thought, I'm not sending any Billy to bed, that's for sure. And of course that was his name, wasn't it?
So he must have lived
him and
either
brother.
next door and where Tommy Gehring used to live down here.
That's
didn't
right.
he? Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is
It was,
now
it was a red brick place, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Long Paddock?
Yeah.
Yeah, where Moira lives.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Well,
it.
I'm glad.
Yeah, we used to have to go past there every day to school, didn't you?
Do you remember the last year you grew sugar beet on the farm?
Wow, that's a good one. Yeah, I do, Jan. I do. I can name it almost exactly. Is there such a thing as almost exactly? You say they're exactly or almost, isn't it? Yeah, Dad had his stroke, right? And that was the end of both. We tried to continue doing potatoes, but the pickers, what you did with potato picking, you paid them so much a bag. So they would, Terry would mark out where each plot would be, so probably a chain each one, 22 yards each person would have, and they'd have bags put there. And there'd be a stick to mark their area. He would go up and down with a potato harvester, harvesting the potatoes, and they would have to pick up, and you always made sure they were picked up before he come round again. So they really had to get a move on. So they'd pick them up, and then at the end of the day, you had all the bags in each one's plot, and you were paid by the bag.
Yeah.
But then they would say to us, "You're cheating, you're putting bigger bags." And then we had to negotiate that, all right, if the bag is a bit bigger, for this one that'll hold 100 weight and a quarter of corn, that will be so much, and when it holds 100, it'll be so much. And it got so blinking complicated. And Dad was out the business then because of the stroke.
That was 1970.
Yeah, 1970. So 1970 was the last year we did potatoes, because it was Lou, I think, was the last time, and Sugarbeet.
So you did actually plant some in 1970, did you?
Yes, yeah.
Because we were talking before you came, and I said I can remember Terry struggling in filthy weather in '69 to get the Sugarbeet in. And I think by 70 you'd had enough.
Yeah, well, we had to, because Dad was our kingpin and he ran it all. When he had his stroke, us three boys didn't even know where our bank manager was. We didn't know anything at all, and his stroke was so severe that he couldn't help at all. So we were absolutely isolated, not knowing our left from our right. And so we got through that year because we were already contracted to the Sugar Corporation. So we went through that year, and then that was it. And pigs, I think we only carried on pigs 1 year after that. I had them at Lou. No, that's right. I'm pretty sure that 1970, Colin still milked a herd here. I milked a herd at Lou. And then we decided, well, hang on, this is stupid. 2 teams breaking off work at 4 o'clock every day. So we took Colin's herd up to Lou and had all the milk at one herd. Colin had all the chicken down here, and Terry did all the arable. But potatoes had gone and Sugarbeet had gone then.
Because I think there came a point when you were told the acreage of potatoes you were allowed, which
That's
was,
right.
I think you were given 4 acres. Well, it wasn't worth the machinery.
Exactly.
So
there's
that got kicked into touch.
Well, there's all sorts of. They would, you would sell your potatoes to the potato marketing board, right? And if there was a fault with them, they would claim that it was not fit for human consumption. So they
could pay you less.
No, but they'd come and spray it pink.
Yeah.
Or purple. Well, it was a purple dye. So. But they tasted just the same, because when you peeled them, there was no purple on the potato, and they tasted very nice.
And
I'll say no more.
Sometimes you could buy crisps that had a bit of pink stain, purple stain on them.
Why, reporting Smith's crisps.
Mm.
Lock 'em up.
Oh, that's brilliant, because I don't think anybody grows sugar beet round here now.
No.
It's all
No.
East Anglia.
Well, actually, yeah, you're right. Because the Kidderminster, I was talking to somebody the other day who comes from Kidderminster, and the sugar beet factory is long gone, and they were telling me what was in its place. I think it's probably an industrial estate now.
Mm.
But yeah, it's long
Oh,
gone.
that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Very much. And another group that would help with the hoeing, because it was so severe, such demanding man-hour wise, was gypsies. Now gypsies would come around, and Dad would let them stay in his field, so you get the horses and the because one was Hoppy's family, Albert Woodley's wife, that was.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They would camp, and it was down God Lane when we had Sugarbeet in what we call Bournesfield, when it's on the Aston Road there. We had Sugarbeet there, and they would camp in our fields, all negotiated, so much to camp, but then they would want so much, and they would do all the hoeing, and that happened a couple of years that we.
And would that be half a dozen of them, or?
It'd be a family, love.
A family.
A big family, yeah.
Lovely.
And to be honest, they did a good job.
Yeah.
Well, you wouldn't have used them again if they didn't.
That's right. Yeah, no, very, very good job.
Brilliant.